The night janitor. David Martinez had worked as a night janitor for 15 years, but he'd never had a job quite like Meridian Corporate Tower. The 40-story glass building in downtown housed dozens of companies, and David's shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., cleaning offices while the business world slept. The pay was excellent, too excellent for a simple janitorial job, which should have been his first warning. But David needed the money. His daughter's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. His supervisor, Mrs. Chen, gave him a simple orientation on his first night. "Clean every floor except the 37th, she said, handing him a master key card. "That floor is off limits. The card won't even work there." "What's on 37? "Storage. Old files. Nothing that concerns you." Her tone made it clear the topic was closed. For the first month, David followed the rules. He cleaned 39 floors, rode the elevator past 37 without stopping, and went home each morning with a hefty paycheck. The building was eerily quiet at night, but that was normal for office buildings. Then he started noticing the elevator. Sometimes when he called it, the elevator would already be moving. The floor indicator would show it stopping at 37, staying there for exactly 3 minutes, then continuing to wherever David had pressed. But according to Mrs. Chen, no one had access to that floor. David began timing it. Every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., the elevator would go to 37 on its own. 3 minutes later, it would return to the lobby. Curiosity finally got the better of him. On a Tuesday night in November, David hid in the stairwell and watched the elevator through the glass doors. At 3:17 a.m., the doors opened on the 37th floor. A woman stepped out. She was middle-aged, wearing a business suit from maybe 20 years ago, carrying a briefcase. Her movements were mechanical, purposeful. She walked directly to the office at the end of the hall and disappeared inside. David waited. At exactly 3:20 a.m., she emerged, returned to the elevator, and descended to the lobby. The floor indicator showed the elevator going down to the basement level, a floor David's key card couldn't access either. The next night, David was ready with his phone camera. He recorded the woman's routine, exactly the same as before. When he reviewed the footage later, his blood ran cold. The timestamp on his phone showed 3:17 a.m., but the woman cast no reflection in the elevator's polished walls. David researched the building's history online. In 2003, a financial scandal had rocked Meridian Tower. Sarah Brennan, a senior accountant at Hartwell & Associates on the 37th floor, had discovered her company was embezzling pension funds from retirees. The night before she was scheduled to testify to federal investigators, Sarah worked late to gather evidence. She was found dead in her office the next morning. Apparent suicide, according to the police report. She'd thrown herself from the 37th floor window. The case was closed. Hartwell & Associates quietly relocated, and the 37th floor had remained empty ever since. But Sarah's briefcase was never found. David realized what he was seeing. Every night at 3:17 a.m., the exact time she died according to the coroner's report, Sarah Brennan returned to her office, still trying to complete her mission to expose the truth. He decided to follow her. The next night, David waited in the stairwell. When Sarah emerged from the elevator, he quietly followed her down the hall. His key card still wouldn't open the 37th floor doors, but they stood slightly ajar, as if someone had propped them open 20 years ago and never closed them. Inside, the floor was exactly as it had been in 2003. Cubicles covered in dust, computers from another era, newspapers on desks with headlines from 2 decades past. Sarah's office was at the end, the corner office with the broken window that had never been repaired. David watched from the doorway as Sarah sat at her desk and began typing on an ancient computer that shouldn't have been able to power on. The screen glowed an eerie blue, displaying financial records, bank statements, evidence of the embezzlement that had cost retirees their life savings. Every few minutes, Sarah would glance at the window she'd allegedly jumped from, with an expression of pure terror. This wasn't a woman who had chosen to die. This was someone who had been murdered for what she knew. When 3:20 arrived, Sarah gathered her papers into her briefcase, looked directly at David, and nodded. Then she walked to the elevator as she did every night. But this time, David followed her all the way to the basement. The basement level was a maze of storage rooms and mechanical equipment. Sarah led him to a small utility closet behind the main furnace. Inside, wedged behind the water heater, was a briefcase. Sarah's briefcase, hidden there 20 years ago. Sarah pointed to it, then looked at David with pleading eyes before fading away like smoke. Inside the briefcase, David found everything. Bank records, forged documents, recorded phone calls, emails, irrefutable proof that Hartwell and Associates had stolen over $50 million from pension funds and that Sarah Brennan had been murdered to keep her quiet. The next morning, David didn't go home. He went straight to the FBI field office downtown and handed over the briefcase. The evidence was old but damning. Within weeks, 3 former executives of Hartwell and Associates were arrested. Families who had lost their retirement savings finally got justice, even if it was 2 decades late. That night, David returned to Meridian Tower for what he somehow knew would be his last shift. At 3:17 a.m., he waited by the elevator. Sarah appeared as always, but this time she was different. She looked peaceful, no longer terrified. She smiled at David, the first time he'd seen her show any emotion besides fear and determination. She stepped into the elevator, but instead of going to 37, the elevator rose to the 40th floor, the roof. When the doors opened, David could see stars through the glass ceiling. Sarah walked out onto the roof, looked back once more, and whispered, "Thank you." Then she was gone, finally at peace. David quit the next week. The 37th floor was renovated and rented out to a new company. The elevator stopped making its nightly trips to the 37. But sometimes, late at night, office workers in the building report seeing a woman in an outdated business suit walking the halls, no longer searching for evidence or justice, just checking to make sure everyone gets to go home safely to their families. Some ghosts, David learned, aren't there to haunt the living. They're there to make sure justice is finally served, even if it takes 20 years, and when their mission is complete, they can finally rest. The pension funds were returned to the families who deserved them. Sarah Brennan's death was officially reclassified as a homicide, though the perpetrators were never identified. David kept the job at Meridian Tower in his resume, but he never mentioned the real reason he'd been hired. Some companies, he realized, need more than just a night janitor. Sometimes they need someone willing to help the dead finish what they started.